What if I told you the way a narcissist's brain is wired fundamentally prevents them from feeling empathy like you do? We're pulling back the curtain on the neuroscience behind narcissism, exploring the very brain pathways that explain their often bewildering behavior.
Can a brain literally be wired to lack empathy? Today, we're dissecting the neuroscience of narcissism, pinpointing the precise brain regions and circuits that are impacted. Get ready to understand why some individuals struggle profoundly with compassion, all through the lens of what's happening inside of their heads.
Welcome to Two Queens and a Joker, My Narcissist Ex and Me. I am Brenda, and I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor working solely with survivors of narcissistic abuse in my private practice. I'm also a survivor of narcissistic abuse.
I'm Sarah. I'm a survivor just as well as Brenda. We're going to be talking about surviving a narcissist, giving my history as well as Brenda's history, and guiding you along the way of how we've gone with our lives.
Today, we're diving into what the science shows about empathy and narcissism, what's happening inside the brain, why compassion can be hard to access, and what that means for survivors.
Let's start simple. What is empathy?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Empathy comes in two flavors. So there's feeling empathy when you actually feel someone else's emotions in your own body. When you see a friend crying and you notice yourself kind of well up with tears, that's feeling empathy.
The other one is thinking empathy, when you can understand what someone is going through, even if you don't feel it yourself.
Here's the big problem. In narcissism, the feeling empathy part is broken or weak, but mostly broken. Researchers call this deficient emotional empathy. And that same weakness is seen in sociopaths or psychopaths, which when I was doing the research on this, I thought that was really interesting because I've always thought of it being narcissism being on a spectrum. And over here, you've got maybe some people that just have some traits. And over here, you've got like full-blown malignant narcissists, almost sociopaths. But the feeling empathy part, what I read was on brain scans, looks exactly the same, which means it's not there for both narcissists and sociopaths. I was shocked when I read that because I thought there would be similarities, but no difference.
Yeah, that's mind-numbing. It's scary to think that how close that's associated with each other because, I mean, that's literally, if you think about it, a narcissist is literally one step away from that. Like how if they can't feel empathy and they can't control that feeling, what's to stop them from progressing on to a psychopath?
Right. And doing really, truly heinous crimes.
Yes.
There's a fine line, I think, sometimes between like a really extreme narcissist and a sociopath. And if you don't know, a sociopath is somebody who they don't care about other human beings. There's no even trying to fake it. They just will take advantage and commit crimes and truly prey on people and murder. I mean, like this murderers, serial killers are sociopaths. So think about a time when someone's emotion hit you so strongly that you felt it in your body. That's emotional empathy. Now think of a time you didn't feel it, but you could understand what they must have been going through. That's thinking empathy. Can you notice the difference in yourself? And if you can, please let us know in the comments.
Absolutely. We would love to get some perspective on this.
Yes. And if this is making sense, because it is pretty complicated.
So what's happening differently in the brain of someone with narcissism, though?
So if we think about it in two ways, the brain's wiring itself, the way that everything's firing in there, some empathy areas are smaller or less connected. So you've got these neurons in your brain that are firing and sending each other messages, right? But in a narcissist or a sociopath's brain, they're not firing as strongly as they do in a non-narcissist brain, and they're not connecting with other neurons.
So it's like a short circuit?
Yeah, pretty much. And like a wire that wasn't big enough to do the job in the first place and is short-circuiting.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then how the wiring works, the brain doesn't switch out of me mode. So for a narcissist, they don't flip that switch where, oh, this isn't about me. I'm really feeling sorry for this person's experience. They don't do that switch. It just doesn't, for most of us, it comes naturally. We see something, and there's an example of this later, but we see something happening or notice something, an emotional response from somebody we care about or even not care about. I mean, like not care about, but somebody we may not know.
Somebody we just don't know.
Yeah. And we can still have an abundance of empathy for them and even have like our own physical or emotional response to their suffering. But for a narcissist, the flip.
It's disconnected.
It's disconnected. Yeah. It just doesn't go there the way that it does in a non-narcissistic brain. So when someone else is in pain, instead of turning their focus outward, the brain keeps looping back to me, 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 me. Like, oh, they're crying. That's making me uncomfortable. That kind of thing.
See, I was thinking like how they can turn that situation or like, oh, this person's upset, I'm upset.
Yeah.
How it always turns back to them, their point of view, their feelings. It can
Mhm.
be happening to someone else, and then it is centered around them.
Yes.
I'm always in awe
Yes.
of how that happens.
And this is describing how it happens, right? Because they just
Yeah.
can't flip the switch. And it does. That's exactly what it is. It's like, how dare they cry, right? That's bothering me.
So that brings to question, do we have a right to be upset that they can't feel that?
Well, we are going to get to a little bit of that too, but hell yes, absolutely. Because I was worried about talking about it for this reason, because I don't want us to think that this is like a brain damage thing or what have you. We typically need to see a lot of research done before we can come to a really strong conclusion about, especially behavioral things. But what happens, and we'll talk about it in a minute, that the wiring is set in such a way that they're at a deficit, right? And we may be wired the same way, but we do not act on it over and over and over again to kind of solidify it, right? And I'll explain that in a little bit, but in more detail. But this is in no way meant to say they're not responsible for how they behave.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
So
just want the way that it read kind of made me think maybe that's what it
yeah,
might have been implying. So I wanted to get your professional opinion on that.
that makes me nervous. I might cut that part out
I
because
don't
I
think
don't
you
want,
should. I think it's really good to keep that in there and to explain because
yeah.
some people might think, oh, okay, well, they're reading other articles, other books or whatever. Well, maybe I shouldn't be upset about it.
Mm,
Maybe they have no control. And the way you just explained it is, no, fuck you. Yes, you should be upset about it.
yes.
Yes.
And they do
They have control. They choose not to have empathy. They choose to just be the asshole.
exactly. They choose to be evil and cruel to other people. What this, we're just going over this kind of briefly, but what this research really said was that these changes in the brain are pretty minimal. They're not like, let's just say somebody had like a brain injury and suddenly they're just a whole different person or they can't really function anymore. It's not anything close to kind of that level. This is just different structuring, a little bit different structuring of how the brain is firing. Some parts of the brain are a little bit thinner, but again, it's definitely not the whole story.
Does that mean narcissists can't feel empathy at all?
Not exactly. It's uneven, but the feeling side is, comparatively speaking, the feeling side of the empathy in the brain is severely deficient compared to the thinking side. Again, it's still minimal in the overall picture, but compared to their thinking side of empathy, it's quite deficient. Studies show that some brain areas involved in emotional connection are smaller. For example, parts of the brain that help you link your own feelings to other emotions, which is what we just talked about. That part's a bit smaller. When tested, people with higher narcissism often fail to shift their attention outward to someone's pain. They fail to shift it outward, right? So that is important to consider. Their self-focus circuits stay switched on too strongly. And again, this happens because this is what they've done over and
They're
over and
choosing. Yeah.
yes, they're choosing and they're reinforcing it in their own brain because they keep doing it. And then our brain recognizes, oh, this is the pattern. When somebody's crying, I act like a dick, technical terms. And so in the research, it says one model describes like a hub in the brain that usually helps us switch between self and others. But in narcissism, that hub becomes biased. And this is that part. So it becomes biased inward, meaning that they turn the others part off and only focus on the self part. The narcissist turns that off, right?
Yeah.
It's not a magical thing that's happening. They do that.
And they enforce it by doing it over and over and over again.
Reinforcement. Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. And I mean, habits get hardwired into the brain, and that's exactly what's happening here. So the thinking side can still work it can still work compared to the feeling side. But the thinking side can still work and often gets used strategically to manipulate others. They can understand what they're supposed to say to look like they actually care, but will use this understanding of empathy to take advantage of others.
I love that they put strategically to manipulate others,
Yeah.
because that's my life.
That's the life for most of
Yeah.
us that have experienced it. It's so common. And it's so plotted and intentional, and it is strategic. The manipulation is strategic, and they just learn to get better and better at it the more they do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
playbook that we talk about all the time.
And it's pretty universal from what I've seen. So all of that to say, the empathy isn't fully missing. It's more like it shows up when it's useful for them, not when it would actually help somebody. And our empathy does help other people.
Absolutely. Without Joker, I think empathy is null and void in him.
Yeah.
He puts his mask on and pretends to show it. But if you sit with him and you know him the way that we know him and the way he talks behind closed doors, yes,
Yeah.
he does not have empathy. He can care less what's going on in his best friend's family or anything like that. When his best friend's around, he will, I'll be here for you. I love you, dude. And then he'll come home and talk nothing but crap about him
Mhm.
and say, well, if he didn't do that, then he wouldn't be in this mess. I'm like,
Yes.
well, you know, nobody's perfect.
Mhm.
Let's try to show compassion. People are people. But no, he can't step out of himself and
Mm-mm.
think, okay, well, this is maybe if this is the way this person is thinking. No, it's as my stepmom used to always say, his way or the highway. And
Yeah.
that's how his brain is wired, his way or the highway.
Yep. Yeah. One of my favorite ways to talk about him, our shared narcissist, he's not ours, but
I don't claim him.
no, me neither. I don't claim him. The narcissist we both experience, unfortunately,
Yes.
but is when he used to brag to me that they were doing the boot collection, standing the firemen when they stand out with the boots and, we're helping people, or the Habitat for Humanity. It used to just make me laugh on the inside because I thought if anybody knew that guy's standing out there with this boot trying to act like some kind of fucking hero, if they only knew the way he talks about homeless people and the way that he talks about really anybody who doesn't meet his standard,
Yes.
which is everybody, right? You
Pretty
could,
much. Unless you're rich or,
yeah,
own whatever he's into at that moment, then
yeah.
yeah, you're beneath him, you're under his shoe, and
Mhm.
he'll act like, "Oh my gosh, I love you, you're my best friend, you're my family, whatever." But
Mhm.
then, like I said, behind closed doors, you're nothing.
No, and the cruelty is really remarkable.
We often hear the phrase "no empathy," but know that now that you know it's not all or nothing, does that shift how you think about your experiences? Were there times they understood your feelings but didn't feel them with you?
Yeah, good question. Let us know in the comments, please.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd
That's
like, yeah, I'm guessing that will resonate with everybody.
a lot of responses on that one. I can't wait to hear those and read them.
Same. Yeah. Mostly too. So just always, all of this is about letting people know they're not alone, and it's just such an isolating experience. I just really want people to know that there are many of us who have experienced like true narcissistic abuse, not just some jackass that we dated, right? But somebody who's
Yes.
really,
Evil.
truly horrible.
Can you give us a brain map that's easy to picture?
So a brain map, what it would look like would be this, like a notification comes in, it pings your brain to say, hey, something's going on with this person over there. And then the next step is that we kind of tune in. What is going on? Let's pick up what's happening with that person's emotional state. This is again for somebody who has a good amount of empathy. And then our brain kind of filters out, okay, this is their emotion, not my own, but we can still feel it for them. And then the last step is that we kind of move the focus from ourselves to the person who's in distress. And again, it doesn't have to be even somebody we know, but people with empathy will often have this process happen, and it happens lightning fast in your brain. But for a narcissist, so the ping isn't very loud, so they don't really pick up on somebody else being in distress in the first place. And then when they do notice, they can't tune into it, or they won't tune into it.
I think that it took other people to signal, for him to, this person's getting attention. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
notice. Definitely he would shuffle in between. Okay, these are what's going on in this situation with this person, but how does it come to me?
Yeah.
How can I get the direction turned to me? He's not able to, with his own eyes, look out and see. He's
No.
always self-centered, at himself and unable to put himself in another person's situation. He
Mhm.
can act like it. He definitely can act like it. He can't feel it.
Yeah. No, he can't. Therefore, he can't show any comfort or concern, like true comfort and concern
No.
for another person. I've told this before, but when he had a family member that was feeling like they wanted to hurt themselves, and all he could say is, he called me about this before and it just bugs me, and he was like, he should just go do it and quit bothering me. And that was and he literally said things like that. But that was his whole attitude. Like, it was an inconvenience that this family member was suffering so much. He just couldn't be bothered with it.
No, his suffering was the only suffering anybody should be
Yeah.
concerned about. Are narcissists just wired that way forever?
I love talking about this stuff. I really, truly do. So there are real brain differences, like we talked about, like the way that they're wiring and firing in their brain is different. But, and it's a big but, brains can rewire. There's a thing called neuroplasticity, which is literally the brain kind of correcting itself. And you'll see this happen right quite literally after some brain injury or addiction is a big one. Your brain will recover after being really abused by some kind of substance. This neuroplasticity is the brain kind of grow back, the neurons firing correctly, getting back on board and getting back online. So it is possible for sure. Possible in the sense that what we talked about before of like having that bias of not focusing outward, that is one of the things that can change with neuroplasticity. But the caveat here, they have to want to do it, right? They have to put
To
the effort.
recognize.
Yep. Yep. And put the work in, because neuroplasticity doesn't just happen. You have to retrain the brain basically. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Train for a marathon because that's what it's going to be.
If it ever happens in the first place, right?
Like, how, like, they don't even recognize that they are narcissists to begin with. And if they do, this is my feeling, they enjoy that about themselves.
This is a really good point. I'm glad you said that, because I've actually noticed that with him. I know that he knows there's a grandiosity about himself, like this, like I'm better than everybody. And I think you're right. And I think if I say, well, you're a narcissist, he would go like, well, I deserve to be. I am better than everybody else.
He would turn it into a positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even not him, like, can truly a narcissist go into therapy and say, yes, I am a narcissist. How do I go about changing my brain? When they're already, really wired that way. So are they like playing a game in their brain with themselves?
Probably if they went to therapy in the first place, because they usually don't. Therapists don't typically see narcissists in therapy, and if they do, they don't last very long. Well, maybe the therapist too, but the narcissist doesn't last very long in the therapy situation. I was at that conference in London though, and one of the presenters, he was so fascinating. He was saying that he's doing studies on people who are in prison. So captive people you might see a change like this happen with them because there's so much motivation for them to make a change. And I don't know if he's even studying that part of it, but he was talking about what he's noticing in this population and how many people in that prison that he worked in actually had narcissistic personality disorder versus sociopathy, which is like, that's the extreme, the extremist of the extreme. Narcissism is pretty extreme too. But I would think that in a situation like that, if you're going to see any brain growth or neuroplasticity happening, it would be in a confined environment like that where they can't manipulate and control in a way that they could kind of out in the wild. So narcissistic empathy is limited, and while the brain has the capacity to change, research shows that change in this area is rare. Therapy often doesn't create genuine compassion. Instead, it can make the narcissist more skilled at using thinking empathy. We talked about that earlier, to manipulate and control. The wiring leans heavily toward self-focus, and survivors should not expect those circuits to suddenly flip. They absolutely won't suddenly flip. And this is the important thing. This is the hugest. Everyone who's listening, hear this the loudest. The brain is not broken. It is biased in a way that strongly resists emotional connection. Can I say it again?
Absolutely.
The brain is not broken. Their brain is not broken. It is biased in a way that strongly resists emotional connection. That is the part. So nobody can listen to this and go, oh crap, I feel sorry for them now. Or, oh, I should have been nicer because they have a brain damage. No. That's not what's happening here.
They resist it.
They resist it. They purposely resist it. each of us is born with a propensity for something. We're born with let's say like the whole cilantro thing. There's a propensity for me. Like if I ate enough cilantro, maybe I would learn to like it, but I hate it. I've always hated it.
How do you live in San Diego and hate cilantro? I'm so sorry to go off topic. You need cilantro in all your Mexican food.
I have literally asked people, actually, the Joker used to make fun of me for this. So I would ask for, like, back when I still ate meat, I would ask for, like, the carne asada burrito, which I loved at the time. And I would ask him if they had any salsa they could put on top that didn't have cilantro in it. And he would get embarrassed, because he's Mexican. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm this white girl saying, no cilantro. It really tastes horrible to me, though.
Well, that's what they say. If somebody either really, really likes it, there's like no median when it comes to
Yeah.
that. It's
Well,
love or hate.
yeah, exactly. And there's a genetic component to it. I mean, they've done studies on this because that's important, but but there's a genetic component. So I was apparently born with this gene that honestly, I don't think it tastes like soap so much. That wouldn't have been the descriptor, but that's what people say, that it tastes kind of like soap. It just tastes bad to me. But this is what I'm talking about with a kind of a predisposition. I could eat cilantro. I'm not going to die. I have eaten cilantro and it's not terrible. Like, I mean, it is terrible, but I could handle it in small doses. So all of
You
that,
can choose to eat it.
I can choose to eat it. And if I had to eat it for the rest of my life, so I didn't hurt people, I would eat cilantro every day. I'd probably even learn to tolerate it. And that's kind of the whole point here, is that, there is a propensity. That does not mean that it's written in stone or that it can't be modified or corrected if the person chooses to, and they won't. For listeners, we'd like to hear what you're thinking. Does it bring you hope, frustration, or maybe both? Just sit with that for a moment. How does this make you feel? And I hope it's not feel sorry for the narcissist, because that is not
Please
the
don't.
point. Yeah,
No.
that is not what we're aiming for here.
I could say it makes me feel frustrated with myself
How so?
because I did feel sorry for him
Oh,
for so long.
yeah.
We didn't know the brain chemistry. I didn't even know what the word narcissistic was.
Mm-hmm.
So my way of thinking is, it's me. It's me.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not. It's not. So
Oh,
you
it's
just know.
definitely.
I mean, you can't read that last sentence enough that you read, where that the brain is not broken, that they choose to not have that empathy, to not use
Exactly.
that empathy.
Emotional
They wired
connection.
themselves that way.
Yeah. And they reinforced it and reinforced it over and over again, which is wiring themselves that way. But the emotional connection is kind of what keeps the human race going. This is what keeps humans together and families and all of that stuff. And if you think about what that means for them to resist emotional connection, that is really powerful. How selfish would you have to be to choose yourself over having connection with your own children or your wife?
That's a big question that I would like answered, please.
Yeah. Well, if I
I
had
don't care about me. I just want to know how he can choose to treat his children, all of them, the way that he's treated them.
Yeah.
And think that, none of them have contact with him by their choosing, but somehow he thinks he's a great dad. He's
That's
there for them, that he
remarkable.
supports them. I'm not even talking about money support. I'm talking about their emotional well being. And
Yeah.
he was that type of person.
Which couldn't be more opposite from what the truth was, right? All of the broken promises to all of the kids, the not showing up, and again, just like as a human being.
What does this mean in therapy and relationships?
People with narcissism often do better with learning scripts or structured ways to reflect feelings, like mimicking what they've seen in other people. Oh, this is how you look like you care about somebody. It's not that they're really feeling like they can. But we need to know, survivors of narcissistic abuse need to know that this isn't about your worth. This has nothing to do with what you brought to the table or your worth or your lovability or any of that stuff. The missing empathy wasn't because you weren't lovable or trying hard enough. It was because their inner wiring, first of all, wasn't firing correctly to start with. And again, remember that's pretty minimal. And then they kept engaging in behaviors that reinforced that way of thinking in their brain. So it made their brain continue to wire that way and get stronger and stronger about not caring and being unempathetic. So for listeners, what I'd like to know Has learning any of this made it easier to stop blaming yourself? And of course, that's not going to be the answer. Like you listen to this and all of a sudden everything's better. But think about it. Think about what we talked about that maybe resonates, and maybe you could take to therapy or think about and do a little bit of work on for yourself. But I think really remembering to do some self affirmations, and maybe something like, this wasn't my fault. The wiring was theirs, not mine. And remember, the wiring, the way that it ended up was their choice and had nothing, not mine, not yours, not anyone who's listening. It was how they decided to have their focus kind of repeated over and over on themselves.
They chose who they were.
They did. They really did. Well, this works for me. I got my way, so I'm going to do that again. That's how the wiring works, right? Yeah. I don't care if I made you cry. I got what I wanted.
So what should listeners take away?
I think that empathy circuits do look different in narcissism, especially on the feeling side, but survivors don't need to carry the blame. If you didn't feel cared for, it wasn't because you were unworthy. It was because they chose to lean into what made them feel better and ignore what other people needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And therapy. Go to a therapist that understands narcissistic abuse. And that's no
specializes in narcissistic abuse.
Because I think people often get invalidated when they don't have somebody that understands it, and that's no fault of the therapist. It is because the manipulation is so subtle and so strong that when a survivor goes and talks to somebody, a friend, a therapist, a family member, whatever it is, and tells the story, sometimes it could sound like, okay, well, everybody slams a cupboard every now and then. And the therapist may not understand the cupboard slamming is the first in the whole abuse cycle. Right? The first step. So now we're all walking on eggshells and everything has to be quiet, or whatever the transition is throughout the cycle. Finding somebody that really understands it, I think, is crucially important.
Find yourself a Brenda.
There are plenty of Brendas out there. Right. Yeah, I mean, not nearly enough. There are people doing this work. So find a narcissistic abuse specialist, and that will make a big difference, I hope.
Believe in yourself. Just start believing in yourself again.
First and foremost, that is the most important thing. Just realizing that this isn't your fault. You didn't ask for it. You would never have walked into this knowing what it was. It unfolded fairly slowly. And then by the time it all unfolds and you start to recognize how abusive it is, you're in pretty deep. And it takes a while to swim out of that quicksand.
Sometimes a long while.
Yeah, exactly. And then kids and all the other stuff. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening to Two Queens and a Joker, my narcissist ex and me. Please answer the questions that we posed or let us know anything else that's on your mind. And we're happy to listen and respond. And if you have topic ideas, please let us know that too.
As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you.